Do you ever catch yourself smiling at how life once felt so simple, and then remember some of those simple habits would raise eyebrows or even fines today? The 1980s were full of easy routines that stitched families, schools, and neighborhoods together. We didn't call them risky. We called them everyday life. Back then, a few beers before driving wasn't a scandal. It was Tuesday. You'd see parking lots outside local taverns gleaming with pickup trucks and laughter spilling into the night. A man might clink bottles with friends, slide into his car, roll the window down, and drive home humming to Springsteen. If he drifted over the line, a friendly officer might flash the lights, offer a warning, and send him on his way. Responsibility hadn't yet caught up to culture. The idea of a designated driver sounded like something from another planet. Looking back now, it's almost unbelievable that we once treated risk like background noise. Yet those drives home, headlights cutting through the dark, radio playing soft rock, were stitched into the rhythm of small-town America. And if the air on the road was free, the air inside was thick with smoke. Walk into a diner, and the first thing that greeted you wasn't a hostess, it was a fog. Cigarettes glowed at every table. Waitresses carried coffee pots in one hand and ashtrays in the other. Parents smoked with toddlers beside them, and nobody blinked. There were smoking and non-smoking sections, but they were divided by nothing more than imagination. Airplanes had smoking rows too, and offices smelled faintly like ash and ambition. People joked that coffee tasted better with a cigarette. Few realized how much the habit cost in years. It wasn't rebellion, it was routine. Non-smokers coughed politely, waved the haze away, and kept eating. The Marlboro Man still ruled the billboards, and television commercials made smoking look suave, even healthy. Only later did the public realize the danger they'd inhaled every day. But in memory, that gray cloud lingers with the warmth of conversation and the glow of jukebox lights, bittersweet, like nostalgia itself. If cigarettes were everywhere, so were the machines that sold them. In bowling alleys and diners stood shiny vending units glowing with red and silver lights. Drop in your coins, pull the lever, and out slid adulthood wrapped in cellophane. Teenagers figured out the trick early. No ID, no questions. It was as casual as buying gum. Even non-smokers remember that metallic clank, the hum of the machine, the scent of fresh tobacco mixing with fried food and floor wax. By the early 90s, those machines vanished, but their ghost remains in memory. A reminder of how easily temptation used to fit inside a coin slot. The same casual danger extended to playtime. In suburban neighborhoods, kids chased each other with toy pistols painted jet black and heavy enough to fool a cop. They leaped over fences, shouting, "Freeze," as mothers called them in for dinner. No orange tips, no neon colors. Realism was the selling point. Parents called it imagination. Today, it might be called a lockdown. But in those days, trust was the rule. We believed everyone could tell a toy from a threat. That belief feels impossibly innocent now, yet it's also what made childhood feel boundless. And then there were the fireworks, those glorious paper-wrapped promises of noise and light. Roadside stands bloomed every summer, run by men in trucker caps and kids barely tall enough to see over the counter. A few dollars bought a brown paper bag filled with Roman candles and bottle rockets. And the 4th of July became a neighborhood symphony of bangs, whistles, and laughter. Parents turned away, pretending not to notice their children experimenting with fuses. Burns and blisters were rites of passage. The smell of gunpowder mixed with grilled burgers, and every spark seemed to shout the same thing: freedom. Today, regulations and safety codes make sense, but something about that reckless joy is hard to forget. After the fireworks came the rides home in the open beds of pickup trucks. You can almost feel the wind now. Warm, wild, carrying the scent of cut grass and charcoal. Kids balanced on the tailgate, shouting to passing cars, arms outstretched like wings. Parents waved from porches. No one worried about sudden stops or sharp turns. It wasn't negligence, it was trust, woven into everyday life. That ride, bouncing down a country road beneath a sky full of stars, was its own kind of magic. Ask anyone who grew up then, and they'll smile before they answer. That memory doesn't fade. Seatbelts, meanwhile, hung limp from the sides of station wagons, like polite suggestions. Families piled into those rolling living rooms with snacks, pillows, and half the neighborhood's kids. Someone's brother slept, stretched across the back seat. Someone's sister built a blanket fort in the cargo area. Parents turned up the radio, steering one-handed while kids tumbled with every curve. Safety wasn't ignored, it just hadn't been invented yet, at least not as a mindset. When the seatbelt laws finally came, many groaned, calling them overprotective. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear the clatter of toys, the crunch of potato chips underfoot, and the laughter rising above the hum of the road. Home life mirrored that same trust. Parents worked late, dinner waited in the oven, and kids learned independence early. A 12-year-old babysitter wasn't a punchline. She was a professional. Younger siblings watched sitcoms until midnight while pizza boxes stacked on the counter. Lock the doors, don't answer the phone, were the only rules. No cell phones, no check-ins, just faith that everything would be fine. And most of the time, it was. Those nights alone built confidence, imagination, and a sense of responsibility that no smartphone app can teach. Still, it's wild to think that a generation learned adulthood by simply being left in charge before they hit their teens. Even the family barbecue carried its own tiny rebellions. Somewhere between the sizzling hot dogs and the sound of cicadas, a parent might hand a child a cup and say, "Just a sip." It was a strange ritual, a way to teach respect for alcohol by tasting it early. Kids grimaced at the bitterness, adults laughed, and the moment passed. No one thought they were crossing a line. It was culture, not corruption, a gesture wrapped in trust. Today, it would spark a scandal, but back then, it was another memory under the summer sun. Airplanes, of course, were miniature smoking lounges in the sky. Ashtrays in the armrests, plumes of gray drifting through pressurized cabins while flight attendants smiled through it all. The non-smoking section, a row or two from the smokers, separated by wishful thinking. The hum of engines mixed with the scratch of matches and the hiss of lighters. It's astonishing to recall that breathing recycled smoke at 30,000 feet was once perfectly acceptable. And yet, for many travelers, that smell still means adventure, the scent of freedom before filters. On the ground, another kind of journey waited, hitchhiking. It was the ultimate gesture of trust, a thumb extended toward the horizon. A cardboard sign that said, "Anywhere." Teenagers, college kids, and workers without cars all relied on the kindness of strangers. Most rides ended safely, with a wave and a story. It felt communal, almost noble, to offer or accept a lift. Of course, not every story ended well, and fear eventually replaced faith. But for a time, the open road truly belonged to everyone. Halloween nights stretched endlessly back then. Kids left after dinner and returned long after the late-night news began. No tracking apps, no parents shadowing them with flashlights. Just pillowcases full of candy, laughter echoing down dark streets, and the occasional prank involving toilet paper and shaving cream. There was risk, sure, but also an intoxicating sense of freedom. The night felt like a secret shared between children and the moon. Today, curfews and supervision make sense. Yet something in us still misses that wild independence, the way the dark once felt like a playground instead of a warning. Mornings, too, carried their own kind of bravery. First graders walked to school in small packs, backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking on wet sidewalks. They crossed intersections without crossing guards, learned which neighbors would wave, and memorized the pattern of safe yards. Parents didn't hover, they trusted. That walk to school was a rite of passage, a miniature march toward adulthood. Today, it might earn a phone call from social services, but back then, it was how kids proved they were growing up. Recess was equally daring. Playgrounds were built from metal, not plastic. Hot in the summer, freezing in the winter, and sitting proudly atop asphalt. Monkey bars towered overhead. Slides gleamed like launch ramps. Kids flew, fell, and got back up. A scraped knee was proof of effort. Teachers watched from a distance, coffee in hand, unconcerned. Those rough and tumble afternoons forged resilience in ways bubble-wrapped safety never could. Looking back, it's almost poetic. Pain teaching confidence, risk breeding laughter. And when recess ended, curiosity continued, sometimes explosively. School chemistry labs were wild laboratories of trial and error. Real acids, open flames, glass beakers, and the faint smell of sulfur. Students mixed powders just to see what would happen. Teachers encouraged experimentation, even when experimentation occasionally meant smoke alarms. Science was thrilling, precisely because it wasn't tame. Today's carefully supervised experiments seem safer, yes, but also smaller, somehow less about wonder, more about control. Back then, the lesson was simple. Discovery always comes with risk. If the chemistry lab taught danger disguised as curiosity, the schoolyard taught it disguised as trust. In the 1980s, pocket knives were not contraband, they were accessories. Boys tucked them into their jeans, comparing blades like baseball cards. They used them to sharpen pencils, whittle twigs, slice apples at lunch, or carve their initials into the underside of the bleachers. Teachers knew, most didn't care. A quick warning was enough if someone got careless. The idea that a small knife could lead to a police call was unthinkable. It wasn't seen as a weapon. It was a rite of passage. Parents gifted pocket knives as symbols of maturity, tiny promises of responsibility. Today, even a toy version would set off alarms and lockdowns. But back then, it was just another tool in a world where trust hadn't yet been replaced by policy. Looking back, it's both shocking and tender how innocence and risk coexisted without anyone noticing the line between them. Lunchtime in the 1980s had one unmistakable scent: peanut butter. Thick, sweet, and everywhere. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches ruled cafeterias, lunchboxes, and bake sales. Teachers kept spare jars for kids who forgot their lunch. Mothers spread it on crackers, celery, even spoons. Protein, they said, and love in a sandwich. No one asked about allergies. The word peanut-free didn't exist yet. Kids traded sandwiches freely. Half a PB&J for a cupcake. No fear, no rules. Bake sales featured peanut butter squares, cookies, and fudge, all unlabeled. Parents smiled at the simplicity of it. Only later did we realize how dangerous that simplicity could be. Today, signs warn, tables separate, and parents double-check ingredient lists. But for those who grew up then, the smell of peanut butter still means comfort. Not caution, a memory that tastes like childhood. Between classes, thirst had a name: Coca-Cola. Soda machines glowed beside lockers, buzzing softly like friendly robots. You could drop in a few coins between English and math and walk away with a can so cold it stuck to your palm. Teachers sometimes grabbed one too. No one cared that the hallway echoed with the hiss of carbonation. Sugar, caffeine, color. It was part of school culture. Kids raced to finish their drinks before the bell, burping in unison as teachers rolled their eyes. The idea of banning soda seemed absurd. Schools even earned a cut from each sale, using the profits for band trips or sports jerseys. By today's standards, it sounds reckless. But in those moments, sipping a cola in fluorescent light, you weren't just drinking sugar, you were tasting freedom in a can. Outside the classroom, enterprise was equally unregulated. Every summer, driveways and sidewalks became miniature markets. A card table, a handwritten sign, a pitcher of lemonade. It was enough. No permits, no inspections, no adult supervision. Just ambition and sunshine. Kids called out to neighbors, selling Dixie cups of sugar water for a quarter. Strangers stopped, chatted, and dropped coins into jars. Hygiene, not a concern. The joy was in the gesture. Parents encouraged it, calling it a good lesson in hard work. Today, in many places, you'd need a license, a food safety form, and probably a parent with a clipboard. But in the 1980s, a lemonade stand was the economy of innocence, a transaction built entirely on trust and smiles. If the lemonade stand was childhood entrepreneurship, the school bake sale was its glorious sequel. Folding tables lined gym walls, stacked high with brownies, cookies, cupcakes, and fudge. None of it had ingredient labels. None of it needed to. Kids used lunch money to buy treats wrapped in plastic wrap and paper plates. Teachers encouraged them. Buy more. It's for the field trip. Nobody asked who baked what or whether nuts were involved. It was chaos, sugar, and laughter. The sweet smell of community. Modern rules would call it unsafe. Back then, it was a social event. It was mothers competing over frosting, fathers sneaking extra cookies, and kids running off with sticky fingers and full hearts. The taste of those bake sales lingers not in flavor, but in feeling. Toy stores in the 1980s were magical and mildly dangerous. Shelves overflowed with marbles, magnets, jacks, and miniature cars, small enough to vanish under the couch or into a curious toddler's mouth. Boxers shouted ages 3 and up, but nobody read the fine print. Parents trusted common sense. Kids learned by accident. Choking hazards. That phrase belonged to the future. Toys were bright, noisy, and, yes, sometimes deadly. The thrill was in the risk. A toy that broke icily was proof you'd played hard. Today, every package comes covered in warnings. Back then, warnings were what your mother shouted from the kitchen. The Consumer Product Safety Commission started tightening toy regulations in the late 80s. But it took decades for the toy aisle to become a padded zone. Looking back, it's hard not to smile at the irony, how the toys that terrified regulators created some of our safest memories. Every so often, tucked among the chocolates and toffees, you'd find something strange. Liquor-filled candy. Little foil-wrapped pieces of grown-up indulgence sold right beside. Milky Ways and Kit Kats. Sometimes they even ended up in a child's Easter basket or Christmas stocking. The surprise was always the same sweet shell, followed by the sharp sting of brandy or rum. Kids made faces, parents laughed, and life went on. It was harmless fun. At least, that's what people thought. Nobody imagined that alcohol in candy would one day be considered scandalous. Those boozy sweets vanished as regulations tightened. But they remain a curious footnote in candy history, a reminder that even dessert once came with a hint of rebellion. In classrooms across the South and Midwest, discipline wasn't theoretical, it was audible. A misbehaving student might hear the call, see the principal. Behind that door waited a wooden paddle, polished smooth from years of use. It wasn't abuse, it was policy. A few swats, a tear or two, and the lesson was considered learned. Parents usually sided with the school, sometimes even thanking the teacher. The phrase, "spare the rod, spoil the child," wasn't philosophy, it was routine. Today, the idea of corporal punishment in schools feels barbaric. But in the 1980s, it was as ordinary as detention. It reflected a culture where authority went unquestioned, and where pain was mistaken for respect. Discipline didn't end at the school gates. Parents carried it into grocery stores, parking lots, and church lawns. A quick smack on the backside, a stern look, and the message was clear. Onlookers nodded approvingly. No one filmed it. No one called the police. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about control. Children learned quickly where the boundaries were drawn. "You'll thank me someday," parents would say, and strangely, many did. That generation grew up believing correction was care, a lesson hard to unlearn in gentler times. On weekends, the line between celebration and lawlessness was thinner than a beer tap. Parks, beaches, and concerts were filled with families and coolers, bottles and cans out in the open. A six-pack beside a picnic basket wasn't rebellion. It was Americana. Cops strolled by and smiled, unless things got truly rowdy. It was understood that public drinking was fine as long as you behaved. The idea of hiding a beer in a paper bag would have seemed ridiculous. People trusted themselves, and maybe that was the problem. Most open container laws didn't appear nationwide until the late 1980s and early 1990s. Before that, a cold drink under the sun was as natural as breathing. Come December, families decorated their windows with spray-on snow. Cans promised a frosted wonderland, and kids drew snowflakes and Santa faces with sticky enthusiasm. What nobody realized was that the snow was laced with lead-based pigments. Children pressed their fingers into the white dust, inhaling particles while laughing and sipping cocoa. Parents admired their creativity, completely unaware that the holiday magic came with toxins attached. When safer formulas arrived years later, people were shocked, but also nostalgic. Even danger, once discovered, couldn't erase the warmth of memory. That's the paradox of nostalgia. We miss what we now know better than to repeat. The quest for beauty in the 1980s came with voltage, home hairdryers, curling irons, and salon-style hoods, plugged into bathrooms with all the grace of a lightning storm. Frayed cords, no insulation, and water everywhere. It was glamour at your own risk. Women perched near sinks, balancing mirrors and coffee cups, while a storm of hot air roared inches from a full faucet. It was the price of style. Today's warnings, "Do not use near water," seem absurd until you remember how close we once came to electrocution for the perfect perm. Still, that sound, the whoosh of air, the smell of hairspray, remains a soundtrack to 1,000 mornings that somehow turned out fine. Every childhood had its bottle of bright red magic, a scrape, a cut, a mosquito bite. Out came the glass bottle and its tiny wand. A dab of mercurochrome left a fiery sting and a stain that looked like battle paint. Kids hated it. Parents trusted it. No one cared that it contained mercury. It was simply what you did. A little pain, a lot of color, and back outside you went. Later, when scientists declared it unsafe, it disappeared quietly from medicine cabinets, but not from memory. Even the smell could transport you back to a kitchen chair, your mother blowing gently on your knee, telling you to be brave. If there was one toy that perfectly captured the 1980s version of freedom, it was the BB gun. Heavy, realistic, and often wielded without a single piece of safety gear. Boys stalked each other through empty lots and backyards, ducking behind trash cans and old tires, staging battles that ended in bruises and bragging rights. Parents knew what was happening. Some even joined in. "It'll toughen them up," they said, smiling from the porch. Goggles were rare, helmets non-existent. Welts on forearms and shins were trophies. The sound of metal pellets against aluminum cans echoed through whole neighborhoods. Of course, the danger was real. Eyes injured, windows shattered, but nobody called it reckless. It was boyhood, distilled into sting and laughter. Today, even a glimpse of such a scene would spark panic. But for that generation, it was a lesson wrapped in chaos. Pain fades, memories don't. Bicycles were the ultimate passport of the 1980s. No helmets, no lights, no limits. Kids flew down hills, popped wheelies, and sped through intersections like miniature daredevils. Gravel burns were common, and a crash was just part of the adventure. Parents rarely interfered. Be home by dinner was the only safety guideline. Helmets existed, sure, but they were for motocross racers or the overly cautious. Most of us preferred the wind in our hair to the weight of plastic on our heads. After sunset, the game changed. The glow of streetlights became the signal to race, to push harder, to squeeze in one last thrill before curfew. The hum of rubber on asphalt, the worry chain, the flicker of shadows under the stars. It was freedom you could pedal. Helmet laws for kids didn't appear until the 1990s, and even then, many resisted. You can't legislate nostalgia. Public pools in the 1980s were a paradox: chaotic, loud, and blissfully unsupervised. Lifeguards, if they existed at all, were usually teenagers more interested in the radio than the deep end. Signs said, "Swim at your own risk," and everyone did. Joyfully. Cannonballs, chicken fights, diving contests. It was waterborne anarchy. Parents dropped kids off with towels and sandwiches, trusting them to survive until pickup time. Nobody worried about lawsuits, liability, or sunscreen. The smell of chlorine and French fries defined entire summers. Accidents happened, of course, but the unspoken rule was simple. If you could swim, you could stay. If not, you learned fast. Those long, sunburned afternoons built independence and a touch of fearlessness. Today, every pool has cameras, wristbands, lifeguards, and waivers. Back then, we just had faith, and maybe a friend yelling, "Watch this," before a perfect belly flop. In school libraries and office cubicles, a new miracle began humming the floppy disk. Thin, bendable, fragile, and utterly futuristic. You could hold the future in your hand. 1.44 megabytes of power. People wondered what anyone would ever do with so much space. The sound of a disk sliding into its drive, click, whir, was music to the modern mind. For students, it meant saving their first typed essay. For parents, it meant progress. It was magic wrapped in plastic. Today, that little square lives on only as an icon, the save symbol on our screens. But for anyone who grew up then, it's more than nostalgia. It's the memory of discovery, of humanity taking its first careful steps into the digital unknown. Evenings at home belonged to the VCR. It was a box that changed the world, letting us capture time, rewind life, and watch our favorite moments again and again. For the first time, television obeyed us. Family movie nights became sacred. A bowl of popcorn, a stack of VHS tapes, and a fight over who had to get up to press play. Rental stores were temples of choice, lined with plastic cases that smelled faintly of dust and dreams. Be kind. Rewind wasn't just a slogan. It was etiquette, the unwritten law of movie magic. The VCR wasn't perfect. Tracking errors, tangled tape, but it democratized entertainment. It brought Hollywood into our living rooms, and in doing so, it stitched countless families closer together. The hum of that machine, the flicker of static before the picture cleared, those were the lullabies of a generation. Every playground had a soundtrack, clack, 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 to acrylic balls on a string, colliding above and below your hand in rhythmic precision. It looked easy, it wasn't. Clackers were hypnotic and hazardous. The plastic could chip or shatter, sending shards flying. Kids practiced endlessly, chasing the perfect rhythm until bruises bloomed on wrists and forearms. Teachers banned them, parents sighed, but kids found new pairs. The US banned Clackers in the early 1970s for safety reasons, but by the 80s, knockoff versions made quiet comebacks through flea markets and dollar stores. Rules rarely stood a chance against nostalgia. When the toy finally disappeared, it left behind more than dents and cracks. It left a sound that instantly evokes childhood energy, laughter, and the stubborn joy of mastering danger. Before supermarkets became the heartbeat of suburbia, some houses still carried remnants of an older rhythm, a milk door hidden in the wall near the kitchen. It opened both inside and out. The milkman would slide bottles through one side at dawn. Families retrieved them from the other, still cool and sweating with condensation. By the 1980s, those doors were vanishing, but a few lingered, like time capsules. They were small acts of trust, proof of a simpler exchange between neighbors and necessity. You didn't need surveillance, you just needed honesty. Today, most milk doors are sealed behind drywall, forgotten relics of an era when your groceries came with a handshake. But if you ever find one, it's like opening a portal, a whisper from a world that believed convenience could be kind. Summers glowed golden, literally. Before SPF 50 and dermatologists' warnings, suntans were a status symbol. Teenagers sprawled on decks coated in baby oil, silver reflectors under their chins, chasing that deep bronze perfection. The air smelled of coconut lotion and determination. Sunburn was considered progress, a step toward beauty. The sting of aloe the next day was a badge of commitment. Everyone knew it wasn't healthy, but health wasn't fashionable. Glow was, doctors warned, magazines shrugged, and the beach kept filling up. Today, sunscreen aisles stretch for miles, but no bottle can replicate the fearless vanity of lying under a summer sun, pretending you were immortal. Before cell phones fit in pockets, car phones filled entire trunks. Antennas sprouted from roofs like metal weeds. You'd pick up a bulky handset attached to a curly cord, wait for a signal, and shout into static. Can you hear me? Owning one meant success, status on four wheels. But they were unreliable, expensive, and gloriously impractical. Calls dropped constantly. Conversations were loud enough for every driver at the stoplight to overhear. Still, in those brief moments when a call went through, you felt like the future was yours. The first mobile phones cost more than some cars. Today, we complain if Wi-Fi takes 2 seconds to connect. The contrast says everything about how far and how fast we've come. Not every toy of the 1980s was harmless fun. In fact, some were glowing warnings of misplaced trust. Believe it or not, you could buy science kits containing real radioactive samples, tiny bits of uranium, or sealed in clear vials. Advertised as educational, they let kids measure radiation with Geiger counters like junior scientists. It sounded exciting. It was also incredibly unsafe. Parents assumed if it came in a box with smiling cartoon atoms, it must be fine. It wasn't, but curiosity burned brighter than caution. By the time authorities pulled such products from shelves, thousands of kids had already played nuclear lab in their bedrooms. Looking back, it's hard not to admire that innocent faith in science. Mixed, of course, with a dash of recklessness that only the 80s could sell. Every home had one, the sacred chaos zone, known as the rumpus room, usually tucked in a basement. It was where the rules went to die. Carpeted in shag, decorated with lava lamps, and furnished with beanbag chairs and second-hand couches. It was the kingdom of unsupervised fun. Kids played records, built forts, wrestled, and invented worlds. Parents stayed upstairs, grateful for the silence. It wasn't pretty, but it was perfect. Mess was part of the design. The rumpus room symbolized something rare, a space made for joy, not display. Today's homes chase minimalism and polish. Back then, we chased laughter. If you grew up in the 80s, you probably remember sitting in a parked car while your parents just ran inside for a minute. The windows cracked, the vinyl seats hot enough to fry an egg, a juice box sweating in your hand. 10 minutes stretched into eternity. You'd fidget with the locks, read the glove compartment manual, maybe honk the horn once just to see what happened. It was boring, uncomfortable, and completely normal. Parents trusted that kids could wait, and kids learned patience the hard way. Today, that same scene would trigger alarms and headlines. But somehow, most of us survived, and even learned to daydream. In the classroom, the chemistry set had a twin at home, the do-it-yourself science kit. They came with real glass burners, sulfur powders, and mysterious liquids that bubbled when mixed. Children turned kitchens into laboratories, striking matches under parental supervision that lasted 5 minutes, tops. Some experiments ended with smoke alarms, others with singed eyebrows, but it was never boring. Science was tangible. You could see it, smell it, sometimes even taste it. Today's versions come sealed in plastic, non-toxic, child-safe, and, some would argue, joyless. Back then, curiosity didn't come with disclaimers, it came with adventure. Before cell phones, before texting, before privacy was a tap away, there was the gossip bench. A wooden seat built with a small side table, usually placed in the hallway next to the family phone. It was half furniture, half confession booth. There were no speakerphones, no emojis, just voices and imagination. You could tell the mood of the house by the tone on that bench. It was social media before screens, intimacy before notifications. When cordless phones arrived, the gossip bench began to fade, then disappear. Today, they're antiques, beautiful reminders that connection used to have a seat, a cord, and a heartbeat. Before influencers and streaming stars, there was Headroom, the world's first virtual TV host. He was snarky, pixelated, and ahead of his time, predicting a world where technology talked back. For a brief moment, he felt like the future. Neon lights, glitchy screens, a voice dripping with irony. His show came and went, but his spirit lingered, the embodiment of an era that loved innovation even when it didn't fully understand it. You can still feel echoes of Max today, in avatars, AI, and digital personalities that blur the line between real and imagined. The 80s didn't just create nostalgia, it created the blueprint for our digital age. No mention of the 80s would be complete without Aquanet, the purple can that ruled the decade. Hairstyles defied gravity, sculpted into towers of lacquer and determination. A single can could hold an entire prom in place. Girls sprayed it like armor before school. Boys borrowed it secretly. Bathroom mirrors clouded with mist that lingered for hours. The scent of Aquanet meant confidence, rebellion, and a touch of vanity. Later, scientists warned about ozone damage, and environmental bans began. But for millions, that aerosol cloud remains a badge of youth, loud, proud, and unapologetically stylish. Every household had a curiosity streak. Parents bought chemistry sets, crystal growing kits, even microscopes with glass slides that shattered if you sneezed too hard. The line between learning and explosion was razor thin. Yet, that danger made science exciting. Children learned cause and effect, not from YouTube, but from singed eyebrows and bubbling test tubes. Discovery was real. Today's STEM kits come sealed, safe, and labeled ages 8+. But the truth is, nothing sparks a lifelong love of learning, quite like almost setting your kitchen on fire for science. Not every household gadget aged gracefully. In the late 80s, a bizarre contraption called the Rejuvenate face mask promised eternal youth through electrical muscle stimulation. In reality, it looked like a prop from a horror movie, a rigid plastic mask that wrapped around your head and zapped your face with tiny shocks. Commercials swore it would tone your skin like a workout. Users mostly reported mild burns and the unsettling realization that they'd paid to electrocute themselves. Still, it represented something truly 80s, an unshakable faith in technology, beauty, and a little bit of danger. It was the decade that believed in miracles sold on late-night TV. Imagine this, it's Sunday morning. Pancakes on the table, sunlight snaking through lace curtains, and faintly, from the ceiling, you hear music, big band tunes, or the smooth hum of Sinatra. Some homes had built-in intercoms, tiny speaker systems that piped sound from room to room. It felt futuristic, like living inside a radio. Parents used them to call kids for dinner. Kids used them to eavesdrop. The sound wasn't perfect, tinny muffled, but magical nonetheless. You didn't scroll for a playlist. You listened together. Today, we carry endless libraries of music in our pockets, yet somehow, that faint melody from the ceiling, shared through the static of a family's laughter, feels warmer than any algorithm could ever create. Even sleep wasn't entirely safe. Many pillows, mattresses, and bedding in the 1980s were filled with synthetic materials that burned faster than newspaper. Fire safety standards were minimal. Manufacturers cared more about comfort than chemistry. Families slept soundly over kindling, unaware that a stray cigarette or shorted wire could turn bedrooms into fire traps. Yet, for all its risks, that era carried a strange kind of peace, the peace of ignorance mixed with trust. When regulations changed, homes became safer. But something else disappeared too: the blind confidence that tomorrow would always take care of itself. The 1980s had an energy that felt almost invincible. We roller skated without pads, lit fireworks in driveways, climbed trees higher than roofs, and drank from garden hoses that baked in the sun. We trusted neighbors, teachers, and strangers at the park. We didn't talk about risk assessment, we just lived. And maybe that's why it glows so bright in hindsight, because we remember the feeling, not the fear. Every scar became a story, every mistake a lesson. We didn't have hashtags or filters, but we had memories raw, unedited, and utterly real. Of course, some of that freedom came at a cost. Accidents happened, mistakes were made, and lessons were learned the hard way. But there's something undeniably human about that era. A time when society still believed people could be trusted with their own judgment. Parents didn't hover, products didn't warn, and every decision carried both freedom and consequence. It was messy, it was risky, but it was alive. Consequence: it was messy, it was risky, but it was alive. Today, we've built a safer world. Yet sometimes, when the night is quiet and a faint 1980s song drifts through the air, you can almost feel that old, wild pulse again. The heartbeat of a time when normal meant fearless. As the 80s faded into the 90s, rules tightened. Warnings appeared. Laws caught up with behavior. Helmets, seatbelts, safety seals. Each new regulation closed a chapter of casual living. We gained protection, but lost a little spontaneity. Still, progress is never the villain. It's just the end of innocence, and every generation has its moment of awakening. For the children of the 1980s, that awakening came wrapped in nostalgia, a longing for a world that didn't yet know what it was risking. So here's to the 1980s. To the tailgate rides under summer skies. To the smell of chlorine and fireworks. To the laughter echoing through smoke-filled diners and neon nights. To the music that played too loud. The toys that were too sharp, and the dreams that were too big. We remember not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. And maybe, deep down, we miss that imperfect freedom the way it taught us courage without lectures. The way it made life feel endless. Because even if the rules have changed, the memories remain untouched. They remind us that once, we lived without fear, without filters, and somehow, that made everything shine just a little brighter. If this trip down memory lane brought back a smile, a scent, or a flicker of your childhood, don't forget to hit that like button and share your favorite 1980s memory in the comments below. Because every story, no matter how ordinary, deserves to be remembered. Subscribe to Memory Lane Media, where nostalgia lives, where every week we revisit the decades that shaped who we are. Until next time, keep the memories alive and never stop looking back.